Royal Guard kicks door down, after Charlotte's secret signal goes off twice. From a young age, she had learned to notice the smallest details around her, whether it was the way someone moved, the faint sound of footsteps in a quiet hallway, or the subtle changes in her surroundings. Living in a historic royal residence brought a unique set of challenges. It was a place of tradition and beauty, with grand halls, intricate tapestries, and polished marble floors that reflected every flicker of light. But beneath its elegance, the palace held secrets, security measures, hidden passageways, and protocols that Charlotte had come to understand over the years. Her quarters were tucked away in a quieter wing of the palace, a room that felt like a private sanctuary. The furniture was antique but comfortable, with a large canopy bed, a writing desk, and shelves filled with books that had yellowed with age. It was her safe space, the one place where she could relax and let her guard down. Yet even here she was aware of the palace's rules. Every room had a hidden connection to the security system, an invisible thread linking the inhabitants to the guards who patrolled the halls day and night. One evening, as the sky outside deepened into shades of purple and blue, Charlotte was reading by the light of a small lamp. The palace was quiet, unusually so. Normally, the distant hum of activity, a servant moving about, the soft clatter of dishes, the echo of footsteps would reach her ears. But tonight there was nothing. The silence was heavy, almost unnatural. Charlotte felt a small shiver run down her spine. She wasn't one to be easily frightened, but there was something about this quiet that felt wrong. She remembered the small, discreet device hidden behind the vase on her bedside table. It was a relic of the palace's older security measures, a button designed to send a silent alert to the guards in case of an emergency. Most people didn't even know it existed, and even fewer understood how to use it. Charlotte had discovered it by accident months ago while cleaning, and the palace staff had quietly explained its function to her. Pressing it once sent a simple alert, a way to ask for assistance. Pressing it twice in quick succession signaled something far more urgent, immediate danger. Charlotte hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the button as she tried to calm herself. Maybe she was overreacting, she thought. The palace was large and filled with creaky floors and shadows that could play tricks on the eyes. Perhaps it was just the wind outside or the sound of a distant door closing. But then she heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound from the hallway. A soft scrape against the stone floor, the kind of sound that would be easy to miss if one wasn't paying attention. Her heart began to beat faster. This wasn't the usual palace noise. Something was different. She pressed the button once. A quiet beep confirmed the alert had been sent. She waited, listening intently. The sound didn't come again. Perhaps it was nothing, she tried to convince herself. But then, moments later, she heard it again, louder this time, closer. A shadow passed under the door. Charlotte felt a pang of fear, sharp but controlled. She had to make a choice. Ignoring it could be dangerous. Acting too hastily could cause unnecessary panic. Her training, though informal, kicked in. Over the years, she had learned to trust her instincts. She had seen the way the guards moved, how they responded to signals, and how crucial it was to act quickly in moments of uncertainty. She pressed the button a second time, the motion deliberate and firm. The signal was now clear. There was an immediate threat and help was needed. Charlotte's pulse raced as she stepped back from the table, glancing at the door. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist in the dim light, but she kept her focus sharp, her senses alert. She crouched slightly behind her desk, positioning herself where she could see the entrance without being too exposed. The palace had taught her a valuable lesson. Visibility could be dangerous, but so could complete concealment. By keeping an eye on the door while remaining partially hidden, she maximized her chances of seeing whatever was coming before it reached her. She wasn't sure who or what was out there, but she knew she had made the right decision by sending the alert. The guards would respond quickly, she reminded herself. They always did. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Every tick of the clock on her wall felt louder, every small noise magnified. The wind brushed against the tall windows, making the curtains sway slightly, but Charlotte could distinguish that from the footsteps she was hearing now. Someone was moving cautiously in the hallway, testing the floorboards, perhaps trying to see if anyone was aware of their presence. She held her breath, counting silently, hoping the guards were on their way. Charlotte thought back to everything she had been taught about the palace's history of security. The building was old, yes, but it was also clever. Secret passages, reinforced doors, and silent alarms were woven into its design. The room she was in had been used centuries ago to protect royalty during times of unrest. Knowing that, she felt a strange mixture of fear and reassurance. She was in a safe place, designed to protect its occupants, and now she was activating those very defenses. Her thoughts were interrupted by another sound, a soft click, followed by a faint movement near the door handle. Charlotte's breath caught. The intruder, whoever it was trying to see if the door would open. She pressed herself closer to the desk, keeping as quiet as possible. Her mind raced. Should she try to speak? No, she reminded herself. The guards would hear her more easily than the intruder would. She had to wait to let them handle the situation. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. Charlotte's nerves were stretched tight, every sense heightened. She could feel the tension in her muscles, the rapid beat of her heart echoing in her chest. She thought of her family, of the people who had taught her to be strong and vigilant. They had always emphasized the importance of calm in a crisis, and she repeated that to herself like a mantra. Stay calm, trust the system, help is coming. Finally, she heard the distant sound of hurried footsteps approaching, not the careful, testing steps of the intruder, but the determined, purposeful strides of trained guards. Relief surged through her, but she did not move. She stayed low, waiting for the moment they would reach her door. Every instinct screamed at her to stay alert, to be ready for anything. The palace, with all its beauty and history, had become a stage for a real-life test of courage and vigilance. Charlotte knew that this moment, though frightening, was also a testament to everything she had learned about paying attention, trusting her instincts, and acting decisively when the situation demanded it. She pressed her hand lightly against the desk, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingers, grounding herself in the reality of the room. She would not panic. She would stay sharp. And she knew that the palace guards, trained to respond with precision and speed, were on their way to ensure her safety. As the sound of the guards grew louder, Charlotte allowed herself a small, quiet breath. She knew that the first part of the night was over. The alert had been sent, the danger had been acknowledged, and the response was coming. Now all she could do was stay prepared, stay aware, and trust that the palace's centuries-old security would hold. The hidden button, the silent signal she had pressed twice, had done its job. The real challenge, the moment of confrontation, was approaching, but Charlotte felt a measure of strength knowing she had taken the right action. Sergeant Thomas had been on duty for years, patrolling the grand halls and corridors of the palace with a steady, watchful eye. He knew the building like the back of his hand. The worn marble floors, the hidden staircases, the quiet alcoves where shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. But even after years of experience, he had never stopped respecting the unpredictability of his work. Every alert, every signal could mean a minor disturbance, or something far more serious. Tonight, the palace had sent him an urgent call, and he was ready to respond. The first alert had appeared on his monitor as a soft blink, a single beep that signaled a possible problem. He had noted it as he always did, filing it mentally as a minor concern. But then the second alert flashed, more urgent, more insistent. 2 signals in quick succession. That was the code for immediate danger. Thomas didn't hesitate. He had been trained to trust the system, to act decisively when the code indicated real risk. Without a second thought, he called for his team and began moving toward Charlotte's quarters. The guards assembled quickly, their movements practiced and precise. They didn't need to discuss plans aloud, each knew the protocols by heart. Thomas led the way, his eyes scanning every corner as they ran. The palace was silent except for the echo of their boots on the marble floors. Paintings and tapestries blurred past as they navigated the corridors, each step taking them closer to the source of the alert. Thomas felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, a focused energy that sharpened his senses. Charlotte's signal had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had sent a clear message through the palace's security network. Someone inside the residence might be in danger, and guards were needed immediately. Thomas had learned to respect these signals, knowing that hesitation could have disastrous consequences. As he approached the hall outside Charlotte's quarters, he slowed slightly, listening carefully. Every creak, every whisper of movement could provide a clue about what they were about to face. The team reached the door. Thomas raised his hand, signaling them to stop and assess the situation. He could see the faint shadow under the door, a movement that confirmed someone or something was inside. He tried to call out to announce their presence in a way that could avoid confrontation if possible. "Charlotte, this is Sergeant Thomas. We're here to help." "Are you okay?" His voice was calm, steady, and authoritative. There was no response. The silence was tense. Thomas knew that the lack of reply could mean many things. Charlotte might have been too frightened to speak, or she might have been physically unable to respond. And of course, the intruder, if there was one, would not answer. Thomas signaled to his team. They were trained for this, trained to act decisively when hesitation could cost lives. He knew what had to be done. With a swift kick, Thomas struck the door. It swung open under the force, and the guards moved in immediately, weapons lowered but ready, scanning the room for threats. The room was in disarray, furniture had been shifted, books were scattered across the floor, and the curtains fluttered from the breeze of the sudden entry. Charlotte crouched behind her desk, eyes wide but unharmed. Relief mixed with fear in her expression as she realized that help had arrived. Thomas moved quickly to secure the room, ensuring that no one could enter or exit without their knowledge. His team spread out, checking each corner and every potential hiding spot. It was methodical, precise work, the result of years of training and countless drills. They found nothing immediately threatening, but Thomas knew better than to assume the danger was over. The palace had many secret compartments, hidden spaces where someone could hide. Every step had to be cautious. Charlotte stood slowly, her hands trembling slightly, though she tried to steady herself. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice small but sincere. Thomas nodded, acknowledging her bravery. Pressing the emergency signal twice had been the right choice. She had trusted her instincts, and those instincts had brought the guards in time. The team began a careful sweep of the surrounding areas, making sure no intruder had escaped. Thomas reviewed the entry points near Charlotte's room. Windows were closed and locked, and the main door to the corridor showed no signs of forced entry. Whoever had attempted this had been cautious, clever enough to avoid immediate detection, but not clever enough to evade the alert system entirely. Thomas knew that the intruder had likely been caught off guard by the speed and decisiveness of the response. As they continued to secure the area, Thomas called the Central Security Office to report the situation. "All clear for now," he said, though he remained vigilant. The alert had been real, and the response had worked perfectly, but the potential for further action was still present. The palace was large, and there were many unseen corners where someone might attempt to hide. Thomas emphasized to his team the need for thoroughness and careful observation. Charlotte watched the guards work, a mixture of awe and gratitude in her eyes. She had always respected the discipline and skill of the palace security team, but seeing them in action in such a tense moment was a revelation. Every motion was deliberate, every decision carefully calculated. The training and experience that had seemed abstract before were now vivid, life-saving skills in motion. She realized just how much trust she had placed in their ability to respond. While the guards continued their careful examination, Thomas moved closer to Charlotte. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "Trusting your instincts and using the signal, there's no hesitation there. You stayed calm and followed the protocol perfectly. That's what matters most in moments like this." Charlotte nodded, absorbing the words. She felt a sense of pride, but also a lingering tension. The adrenaline was still coursing through her, and her mind was racing with thoughts about what might have happened if she had hesitated. The team began gathering evidence of the attempted intrusion. Small footprints in the dust by the door, a scuff on the polished floor, a slightly ajar drawer. Each detail was carefully documented. Thomas knew that every clue could be important for understanding the intruder's intentions. While there was no immediate threat present, piecing together what had occurred could prevent future incidents. Charlotte watched as the guards worked, impressed by their thoroughness and commitment to safety. Thomas reflected on the importance of communication and timing in situations like this. The alert system was designed to bridge the gap between danger and response, to give those inside the palace a voice, even when words couldn't be spoken. Charlotte's quick thinking had activated that bridge, and it had worked exactly as intended. He felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that the system and the team had performed flawlessly under pressure. After what felt like hours but had likely only been minutes, Thomas and his team completed their sweep. They ensured that every entrance was secure, Every potential hiding spot had been checked, and Charlotte's safety was guaranteed. Only then did they allow her to breathe more freely, though she remained attentive. The palace had taught her vigilance, and it was a lesson she would not forget. Thomas gathered his team for a final briefing. "Stay alert," he said. "The immediate danger has passed, but we need to maintain vigilance. Every alert is important and every response matters." His words were both a reminder and a reassurance. Charlotte realized that the calm, controlled manner in which the guards operated was a form of protection in itself. Their confidence and discipline created a sense of safety that words alone could not convey. As the night continued, Charlotte reflected on the experience. She had been scared, yes, but she had also been empowered by her own actions. Using the signal twice had been decisive, and it had made a tangible difference. She realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the ability to act thoughtfully and decisively in spite of it. The guards' arrival had confirmed that her instincts were valuable and that trust in the system was justified. By the time the corridors returned to their quiet, Thomas and his team had secured the palace and ensured that all protocols were followed. Charlotte felt a mixture of relief and admiration. She had experienced firsthand the efficiency, skill, and dedication of the royal guards, and she knew that her life, and perhaps the integrity of the palace, had been protected by their readiness to act. As dawn approached, the palace remained peaceful, but Charlotte's awareness had deepened. She understood the delicate balance of vigilance, trust, and decisive action. That night had shown her the power of preparedness and the importance of responding quickly to signs of danger. She would remember it not only as a frightening moment, but also as a lesson in courage, trust, and the quiet heroism of those trained to protect. The moment Sergeant Thomas kicked open the door, everything shifted. The room, once a quiet sanctuary, became a stage of sudden action. The air seemed to vibrate with tension, and Charlotte's heart pounded so loudly that she was certain the guards could hear it. She crouched behind her desk, her fingers gripping the edge as she tried to steady herself. The lamp flickered in the gentle draft caused by the door swinging open, casting dancing shadows across the walls. In that instant, time seemed to slow. Every movement, every sound was amplified in her mind. Thomas and his team moved in immediately, trained to act with precision and calm under pressure. Their eyes scanned the room systematically, weapons lowered but ready. They checked every corner, every piece of furniture, and every possible hiding place. Charlotte remained behind her desk, watching them, her own fear mingling with relief. The sound of footsteps on the polished marble floors echoed through the room, a reassuring rhythm that confirmed the guards were in control. The room itself told a story. Books lay scattered across the floor, as if someone had hurriedly rifled through them. A chair had been toppled, and the curtains swayed slightly from the sudden entrance of the guards. Charlotte's first thought was that the intruder must have been searching for something specific, but she could not tell what. Every detail mattered. Thomas moved closer to the desk, keeping a careful eye on Charlotte while also ensuring no danger remained. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice steady, professional, but not harsh. Charlotte nodded, her voice caught in her throat for a moment before she whispered, "Yes, I think so." She realized just how fortunate she was. The intruder had not harmed her, and the guards' quick response had prevented any direct confrontation. Still, the adrenaline coursing through her veins made her feel tense, alert, and strangely alive. Thomas directed one of his team members to secure the windows while another examined the doors. "Check every entry point," he instructed. "We need to make sure there's no one else inside and that no one can come in unnoticed." The team worked quickly, systematically, as they had trained. Their efficiency reassured Charlotte. She had known the palace guards were skilled, but seeing them act in a real emergency demonstrated just how disciplined and professional they were. Charlotte finally rose from behind her desk, feeling a mix of fear and courage. She looked around the room, noticing small details she had previously overlooked. A faint scuff mark on the floor, a slightly shifted bookshelf, and the subtle scent of someone unfamiliar in her quarters, all clues pointing to the intruder's brief presence. She realized that every small action she had taken mattered. Pressing the emergency signal, staying calm, and positioning herself safely had all contributed to the guards' ability to respond effectively. Thomas spoke again, addressing Charlotte directly. "You did the right thing." Staying calm and following the protocol allowed us to respond in time. That made all the difference. His words carried a quiet authority and reassurance that calmed Charlotte's racing thoughts. She nodded, realizing how important it was to trust both her instincts and the system designed to protect her. The guards began a more detailed sweep of the room. One lifted the rug, another checked behind the heavy drapes, while a third inspected the closets. Every possible hiding place was examined. Thomas himself scanned the room one last time before moving toward the entrance to check the hallway. He wanted to ensure that the intruder had not escaped into other parts of the palace. Charlotte followed, keeping a safe distance but observing closely, fascinated by the methodical approach. As they reached the hallway, Thomas signaled the team to split up and conduct a broader search. They moved with purpose, their steps silent but deliberate. Charlotte realized that what seemed like chaos to an outsider was, in fact, a carefully coordinated operation. Each guard had a role, each movement had a reason, and the team functioned like a single, well-tuned organism. She had pressed the signal twice, but it was the guards, training, and teamwork that had turned that alert into immediate, effective action. The search revealed little in the hallways. Footsteps echoed faintly, but there was no sign of the intruder. Thomas considered the possibilities. Whoever had entered Charlotte's room had likely been caught off guard, possibly fleeing at the sound of the door being kicked open. The intruder may have intended to retrieve something specific or gain information, but the sudden arrival of the guards had forced them to abandon their plan. Thomas felt a measure of satisfaction. The system had worked. Charlotte's quick thinking had prevented any harm, and the palace remained secure. Returning to Charlotte's room, Thomas and the team gathered around to review the scene. They documented everything carefully: the disordered books, the scuff marks, and the minor disturbances that indicated the intruder's path. Each detail was important for understanding the situation and ensuring that preventive measures could be improved for the future. Charlotte watched silently, impressed by the thoroughness of the guards' work. It was a reminder that courage was only one part of the equation. Preparation, training, and attention to detail were equally crucial. Charlotte spoke quietly, her curiosity overcoming some of her lingering fear. "Do you think they were looking for something specific?" she asked. Thomas considered this for a moment. "Possibly," he replied, "but we may never know exactly what they intended. The important thing is that you followed the protocol and we responded quickly. That's what kept you safe." Charlotte nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The details of the intruder's plan were secondary to the fact that the emergency system and the guards' rapid response had worked perfectly. After a moment of reflection, Thomas addressed his team. "Ensure all areas near Charlotte's quarters are secure and keep a watch on potential entry points. We don't know if this is an isolated incident." The team acknowledged, splitting up to continue monitoring the area. Charlotte felt a mixture of awe and reassurance. She had witnessed firsthand the balance of authority, skill, and dedication that the guards brought to their work. Their presence was more than physical protection. It was a sense of order, discipline, and security that permeated the palace itself. Charlotte moved around her room, taking in the aftermath. She realized that the incident, while frightening, had also revealed something valuable about herself. She had been scared, yes, but she had also acted decisively and thoughtfully. Pressing the emergency signal twice had required courage and clarity of mind. She understood that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. That lesson, reinforced by the guard's presence, would stay with her forever. Thomas returned to Charlotte, his expression serious but calm. "You handled this situation as well as anyone could," he said. "Your calmness and clarity allowed us to respond in time. That's why the system works. It relies on people like you to trust their instincts and follow protocol." Charlotte felt a sense of pride, tempered by the lingering adrenaline that made her palms sweat and her heart race. She realized that real courage often came in quiet moments, in actions that required thought and composure rather than dramatic gestures. The guards completed their inspection, ensuring that all potential hazards were neutralized. They double-checked locks, windows, and entry points, leaving nothing to chance. Charlotte observed the process with growing respect, understanding that this careful attention to detail was what separated success from disaster in emergency situations. Every precaution mattered, and every small action contributed to the overall safety of the palace and its residents. As the night slowly gave way to early morning, Charlotte finally allowed herself to relax slightly. The immediate threat had passed, thanks to her quick thinking and the guards' decisive actions. She felt a deep sense of gratitude towards Sergeant Thomas and his team, knowing that their training and dedication had protected her. She realized that the palace's security system was not just about technology or rules. It was about the people who understood it, trusted it, and acted without hesitation when needed. Charlotte sat at her desk, reflecting on the events of the evening. She had faced fear, acted decisively, and observed professionals in action, learning lessons she would carry with her for life. The room, once a scene of potential danger, now felt safe again, a reminder of the importance of vigilance, preparation, and trust. She understood that courage was not simply about facing danger. It was about making smart choices, following protocol, and knowing when to rely on others. In the quiet aftermath, Charlotte knew she had grown stronger. She had experienced firsthand the value of careful observation, decisive action, and trust in those trained to protect. The events of the night would remain etched in her memory, a story of courage, preparedness, and the quiet heroism that often goes unnoticed but makes all the difference when it matters most. After the immediate tension of the break-in had passed, Sergeant Thomas knew that the work was far from over. The palace was secure for now, thanks to Charlotte's quick thinking and the guards' decisive actions, but they still needed to understand exactly what had happened. Thomas gathered his team in a quiet corner of the corridor outside Charlotte's room. "We need to investigate thoroughly," he said, his tone calm but firm. "We don't know if this was an isolated incident or part of a larger attempt. Every detail matters." Charlotte watched from her desk as the guards prepared to begin their investigation. Her initial fear had given way to curiosity and a sense of responsibility. She wanted to help in any way she could, knowing that her observations could be valuable. She began recounting everything she had noticed. The strange sounds in the hallway, the faint scuff marks on the floor, the small movements of the intruder near the door handle. Every detail, no matter how minor it seemed at the time, might provide a clue. Thomas listened carefully, asking questions to clarify her observations. "When you first heard the noise, how did it sound? Was it heavy footsteps, light footsteps, dragging?" Charlotte thought for a moment, recalling the soft scrape she had noticed initially. "It was light," she said, "almost like someone was trying not to be heard, but then it got louder, like they were testing the floorboards or moving faster." Thomas nodded, appreciating the clarity of her description. "Good, that's exactly the kind of information we need." The team began a methodical examination of Charlotte's room and the surrounding areas. They documented every detail: the displaced books, the chair that had been knocked over, the subtle marks on the floor, and the slightly ajar drawers. Each clue was photographed and noted, ensuring that they had a clear record of the incident. Thomas emphasized to the team that no detail was too small. In situations like this, minor evidence could provide insight into the intruder's intentions or methods. Charlotte stayed close, observing the process. She was impressed by the guards' precision and patience. Every action was deliberate, every movement carefully considered. They worked not only to secure the room, but also to understand the motives of the intruder. Charlotte realized that courage was only one part of the equation. Understanding, preparation, and careful observation were equally important. Thomas moved toward the door, examining the handle and the lock. "No signs of forced entry here," he noted. "Whoever came in was cautious. They knew the layout and likely had a plan, but they were surprised by our response." The observation made Charlotte shiver slightly. The intruder had been clever, but the palace's security system and the guards' quick action had thwarted the attempt. Thomas's calm analysis reminded her that even the best-laid plans could fail when vigilance and preparedness were in place. Next, the team inspected the windows. Each one was closed and securely locked. There were no signs of tampering, and the curtains had only been disturbed by the sudden movement of the guards entering the room. Thomas noted, "It seems the intruder had only one real point of entry, your door." They likely had information about the layout and were trying to move quickly without being noticed. Charlotte nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and concern. The intruder had been clever and deliberate, but they had been stopped before causing harm. The guards then examined the corridor outside her room. Thomas directed a team member to check the surveillance logs and monitor any unusual activity from earlier in the evening. Charlotte watched as the team pieced together the movements of the intruder, using both physical evidence and digital records. It was like watching a puzzle being assembled, each piece revealing a part of the larger picture. Charlotte realized that investigation required patience, attention to detail, and careful reasoning, skills that were just as important as bravery in a crisis. As the investigation progressed, Thomas began to form a clearer picture of the intruder's intentions. The displaced books and scattered papers suggested that someone had been searching for information. The intruder had been cautious but determined, indicating that they had a specific goal in mind. Thomas shared his thoughts with the team. They were looking for something particular. We may not know exactly what, but we can prevent future attempts by understanding their approach. Charlotte listened intently, realizing the importance of analysis and foresight in ensuring ongoing safety. Thomas then addressed Charlotte directly. You need to understand how important your actions were. Pressing the signal twice wasn't just a precaution, it triggered our response immediately. Without that, the intruder could have continued unchecked. Your awareness and decision-making kept you safe. Charlotte felt a deep sense of pride mixed with humility. She had acted on instinct, but she realized now that her instincts were informed by knowledge, observation, and careful attention. It wasn't luck, it was preparedness. The guards continued their inspection, moving methodically from room to room, ensuring that no other areas had been compromised. Charlotte followed, observing the process with growing admiration. The palace was a complex structure, full of hidden alcoves, secret passageways, and multiple entry points. Ensuring security required not only vigilance, but also a deep understanding of the building's design. The guards demonstrated both skill and dedication, moving with a quiet authority that commanded respect. As they worked, Charlotte reflected on the broader implications of the incident. The intruder's attempt had been bold and calculated, but it had also been stopped by a combination of human awareness and systematic security measures. She realized that safety was not a passive state. It required constant attention, quick thinking, and collaboration. Each person had a role to play, and her actions had been a crucial part of the chain that prevented harm. Thomas gathered the team for a final review. We've documented everything here, he said. The room is secure, the surrounding areas have been checked, and we have records of the intruder's attempted actions. Our next step is to analyze the evidence and determine if this was an isolated incident or part of a larger plan. Charlotte, you'll be briefed on any further developments, but for now, your quick response has prevented anything serious. Charlotte nodded, grateful for the reassurance. She understood that the investigation was ongoing, but she also felt confident that the immediate danger had passed. Later, as the palace began to return to its usual calm, Charlotte had a chance to reflect on the lessons she had learned. The incident had been frightening, yes, but it had also demonstrated the importance of vigilance, preparedness, and teamwork. Every action from pressing the emergency signal to the guards, systematic investigation, had contributed to the outcome. Charlotte realized that courage was not only about facing fear, but also about being aware, making thoughtful decisions, and trusting the system in place to protect her. Thomas and his team completed the documentation and secured all evidence for further analysis. They made notes about the scuff marks, the displaced furniture, and the minor disturbances that indicated the intruder's movements. Charlotte watched as the guards worked, impressed by their thoroughness and professionalism. She realized that their dedication extended beyond immediate action. They were committed to understanding and preventing future incidents as well. By the time the investigation concluded, Charlotte felt a mixture of relief and admiration. The palace remained safe, the intruder had been stopped, and she had witnessed firsthand the importance of careful observation, quick decision-making, and teamwork. She understood that courage was only one element of safety. Preparation, awareness, and collaboration were equally vital. Charlotte also recognized the value of her own instincts and actions. Pressing the emergency signal twice had set everything in motion. It had alerted the guards, triggered a rapid response, and ensured her safety. She realized that her attentiveness, combined with the training and dedication of the palace guards, had prevented what could have been a far more serious situation. The experience strengthened her confidence, teaching her that being alert and acting thoughtfully in moments of uncertainty could make all the difference. As the night drew to a close and the first hints of morning light began to filter through the palace windows, Charlotte felt a sense of calm she had not felt since the events began. The room, once disrupted by fear and uncertainty, now felt restored, secure, and orderly. She knew that while the investigation might continue, the immediate danger had passed, and her actions, combined with the skill and dedication of the guards, had ensured her safety. Charlotte sat quietly at her desk, reflecting on the events of the night. She had faced fear, made quick decisions, and observed professionals at work, learning lessons that would remain with her for life. She understood the importance of vigilance, preparedness, and trust in systems designed to protect. Most importantly, she realized that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act thoughtfully, decisively, and with awareness when it mattered most. By the early hours of the morning, the palace had returned to its usual calm, but the events of the previous night lingered heavily in the minds of those involved. Charlotte sat quietly in her room, the lamp casting a soft glow across the desk, illuminating the scattered papers and books that had been disturbed during the intruder's attempt. She felt a strange mix of relief, exhaustion, and awe. Relief that she was safe, exhaustion from the adrenaline that had kept her alert for hours, and awe at the efficiency, courage, and dedication of the palace guards who had responded so quickly and decisively. Sergeant Thomas gathered the team for a final debrief. They had secured the premises, documented every detail, and completed the initial investigation. "This situation has shown the importance of vigilance," Thomas said. His voice was calm, measured, but carried the weight of experience. Charlotte's quick thinking and the team's rapid response prevented this from escalating. Every action mattered. Every small decision made a difference. The team nodded, understanding the gravity of the words. For them, it was a reminder that their work required constant readiness and attention, and that the lives of others depended on it. Charlotte reflected on Thomas's words. She realized that the night had been more than a test of courage. It had been a lesson in trust, responsibility, and awareness. Pressing the emergency signal twice had set everything in motion. That simple, decisive act had ensured her safety and allowed the guards to respond in time. She understood that safety was not a passive state. It required awareness, quick thinking, and reliance on those trained to protect. The experience had given her a newfound respect for the invisible systems of protection that surrounded her daily life in the palace. Later, Thomas personally came to Charlotte's room to speak with her. "I want you to know," he began, his tone sincere, "that your actions made a real difference. You remained calm, you trusted your instincts, and you used the system correctly. That's exactly what we rely on. You've shown courage and awareness in a way that goes beyond simply reacting to fear." Charlotte felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride and humility. She had acted out of instinct, but she realized now that her decisions had real consequences, and they had saved her from potential harm. Thomas continued, "Incidents like this are rare, but they remind us why training and protocol exist. We're here to respond, but it's the people inside the palace, the residents, who often make the first difference. Your actions tonight are a perfect example of that." Charlotte nodded slowly, absorbing every word. She understood that bravery and preparedness were not just about physical courage. They were about observation, clear thinking, and timely action. Her calm presence had been crucial, and Thomas's acknowledgement reinforced the importance of that mindset. The palace staff, who had been alerted to the situation, began reviewing the events as well. Reports were filed, and preventive measures were discussed to ensure that such an attempt could be prevented in the future. Charlotte realized that her quick thinking had set off a chain reaction of preparedness, awareness, and analysis that extended far beyond her room. The entire palace had become a living example of coordinated safety, where every action, observation, and decision mattered. Charlotte spent the rest of the morning reflecting quietly. She considered what had frightened her most: the unknown intruder, the sudden noises, and the uncertainty of the situation. But she also recognized what had empowered her: knowledge, awareness, and decisive action. She realized that fear was natural, but it did not have to dictate her choices. By combining calm observation with thoughtful decisions, she had maintained control and ensured her safety. That lesson, she knew, would stay with her for life. Throughout the day, Thomas and his team continued to monitor the palace, ensuring that all security measures were functioning correctly. Charlotte observed from a distance, noting how methodical and careful their approach was. She realized that safety and security were not about chance. They were about diligence, preparation, and continuous attention. Every guard had a role, every system had a purpose, and every resident had a responsibility to remain aware. The night's events had demonstrated the delicate balance between human vigilance and systematic protection. Charlotte also took time to speak with other staff members, sharing her experience and reflecting on what had happened. She emphasized the importance of awareness, calm decision-making, and trusting protocols. Her story became a lesson for others, a reminder that even small actions could have a significant impact when combined with professional support. The palace had faced a potential threat, but through courage, vigilance, and teamwork, disaster had been averted. Later that afternoon, the security team completed their final review and secured all documentation related to the incident. Every detail had been recorded. The initial sounds Charlotte had noticed, the displacement of furniture, the scuff marks on the floor, and the guards' actions during the response. Thomas reviewed the evidence carefully, noting patterns and potential lessons for future situations. Charlotte sat nearby, observing the thoroughness of the process. She realized that preparedness extended far beyond immediate action. It included analysis, reflection, and learning from every incident. By evening, the palace had returned to its normal rhythm, the tension of the night replaced by quiet activity. Charlotte walked through the halls, noticing the way sunlight reflected off the polished floors and the shadows shifted along the walls. She felt a renewed appreciation for the palace, not just as a historic residence, but as a living system of protection, vigilance, and coordination. Every detail, from the hidden security signals to the trained guards, was part of a network designed to safeguard those within. That network had worked perfectly, and she had been a vital part of it. Charlotte also reflected on the personal growth she had experienced. She had faced fear and uncertainty, but she had acted decisively and thoughtfully. She understood that courage was not simply about confronting danger. It was about preparation, awareness, and taking responsibility for one's actions. That realization filled her with a sense of confidence and maturity, a feeling that she could carry into other aspects of her life beyond the palace walls. In the days that followed, Charlotte noticed subtle changes in the way she approached her surroundings. She remained alert to small details, aware of potential risks, and confident in her ability to respond. But she also felt a sense of calm, an understanding that vigilance did not mean constant fear, but rather thoughtful attention and preparedness. The events of the night had taught her a balance between caution and composure, between awareness and calmness. Thomas continued to check in with Charlotte, offering guidance and reassurance. "Remember," he said one afternoon, "being prepared is not just about responding to danger. It's about understanding it, anticipating it, and trusting the people and systems around you. You've done that, and you've shown how important it is." Charlotte appreciated his guidance, recognizing that the lessons she had learned were both practical and profound. She had experienced firsthand the power of careful observation, decisive action, and trust in a coordinated system. The palace also used the incident to reinforce security awareness among all residents and staff. Training sessions, reminders about protocols, and discussions about vigilance were implemented. Charlotte contributed her perspective, sharing her experience to illustrate the importance of awareness and calm decision-making. Her story became an example of how ordinary actions, pressing a hidden signal, staying calm, and observing carefully, could have extraordinary consequences. As the sun set over the palace, Charlotte stood by her window, looking out at the gardens bathed in golden light. She thought about the night's events, the fear, the adrenaline, the swift arrival of the guards, and the thorough investigation that followed. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the people who had protected her and a renewed confidence in her own instincts and decisions. The experience had been intense and frightening, but it had also been transformative, teaching her lessons she would never forget. Charlotte realized that true courage was quiet, thoughtful, and deliberate. It was the ability to act despite fear, to trust one's instincts, and to rely on others when necessary. It was the combination of awareness, preparation, and decisive action that kept her safe. The palace, with its hidden signals, trained guards, and centuries of experience, had provided the framework for safety, but it was her choices that had made the critical difference. As she reflected on the night, Charlotte felt a sense of closure and clarity. The intruder had been stopped, the palace was secure, and she had learned invaluable lessons about courage, vigilance, and responsibility. She understood that safety was not a single moment of action, but a continuous practice of awareness, preparation, and thoughtful decision-making. That knowledge gave her a confidence that was steady, quiet, and enduring. Charlotte sat down at her desk one last time, taking a moment to write in her journal. She described the events of the night, her thoughts, feelings, and the lessons she had learned. Writing it down made the experience tangible, allowing her to process everything fully. She realized that sharing her story could help others understand the importance of awareness, calmness, and trust in protective systems. Her actions had been small, but their impact had been significant, and she wanted that lesson to be remembered. By the time the evening had fully settled, Charlotte felt a sense of peace she had not known since the intruder's first attempt. The palace was quiet, the guards remained vigilant, and she was safe. She understood that courage, preparedness, and awareness were not abstract concepts. They were practical tools that could make the difference between safety and danger. Charlotte's experience had demonstrated that, and she felt stronger, wiser, and more confident as a result.